means if you've got those city projects, those pet projects that you want, maybe we can just tack it on to this development. We elected again not to take that risk because our legal counsel would insist on putting in requirements that they comply with the public works contracting law. So if you've got some airport infrastructure improvements that you wanted to make, we determined it was better if we made those improvements ourselves than to add a small incremental cost to a development project that could result in significantly higher costs as a result of public works contracting. And we took some tactics. There were some tactics we took to avoid that. For example, one of the things that could trigger a public works contract if the building was owned by the airport and it was leased to a developer and he was going to make improvements in development, it would also trigger the public works contracting law. So in one instance where we're going to talk about where we actually had an existing tenant with an expiring lease, we negotiated an amendment to his lease which would allow us to transfer title to those improvements, not through the city, but directly to the third party that the city selected through an RFP process. Again, having to avoid acquiring title in our name. The value of the improvements we had determined were not that significant. We could have asked for additional consideration for allowing them to have improvements for the balance of the useful life of those improvements, but we elected not to do that. Instead, we were looking to get more investment by the company that would be doing this project. So public works contracting law was a big issue for us, and avoiding that was something that we worked hard to do in at least two of the three projects that we have currently on the way. The first development I'm going to talk about is a development that we did exclusively with an existing tenant that had been on the airport since 1990. They were known as corporate helicopters, and they provided a broad array of services. They had been basically a major sublessee with one of our major subtenants for this entire period of time. They leased a number of facilities, as you can see, on the airport for their project. They already provided full service fixed base operator services for helicopter operations. They provided charter service, flight training, aerophotography. They were big on movie productions. They filmed the Baja races. So they were big business in San Diego and had been there for a number of years. But they had gotten so large that they could no longer basically operate within that sublease area that they were occupying. Their customers included the San Diego Fire Department, the County of San Diego, Edison. They did a lot of utility work, and they just simply had outgrown their businesses. So we had proposed to negotiate a lease directly with them to allow them to move their business operations to midfield, a better location, actually, for a helicopter FBO. They virtually had helicopters parked in the parking lot. That's how big and how expansive their project had taken on. So we ended up negotiating with them a 50-year lease for them to develop and operate the new FBO. They're going through the development processing stage right now. We've had our initial preliminary submittal, and we're working with them to get those plans approved and moved on to the next phase. The next project I want to talk about is a request for proposal and developer selection. We basically solicited proposals for the development of a 9.5 acre parcel at the Montgomery Gibbs Executive Airport. This is the project where we had the existing lessee agree to sign a quitclaim deed, quitclaiming its interest in those leasehold improvements to the developer that we selected. The two highest proposals we received were one from Coast Air Center. Coast Air Center was a flight training school that had been in business in San Diego for over 20 years. They had a $40 million contract with American Airlines to train their pilots, train their military pilots from helicopters to fixed-wing operations. And that over a course of the 40-year contract was for a 4-year period. Definitely a business we wanted to keep. They proposed, as you can see, $5.8 million in improvements within the first 4 years, including a flight school, a full-service FBO, community hangar, and executive hangars. The competing proposal was $5 million over 10 years with only 8,000 square feet of executive hangars and a 10,000 square foot flight school. The flight school that they had proposed to attract was Coast Air Center. The second proposer offered almost $70,000 a year more in rent than we received from the Coast Air Center proposal. But the Coast Air Center proposal we determined to be the highest and best use, and based on a multi-criteria selection process, we basically rated their proposal as the best, recommended that to the City Council, and the City Council agreed. Here you can see the score sheet, the criteria that was used to select the proposal. I don't know, who's that guy that gave him 100? That's incredible. All right. And you can see the criteria for the second proposal. They all came within 10 points of one another, so we did invite them in for oral interviews before making the final selection. And by the way, that's a story I like to tell to the FAA, particularly since we took less money with this project. This is what Coast proposes to develop: a full-service FBO, flight training, aircraft hangars, maintenance, and full-line service, as well as fuel cells. And this is their proposed development. Let's talk about the Metropolitan Airport project. That project involved the master planning and development of over 207 acres at Brownfield Airport. Any of you have ever gone to Brownfield Airport in San Diego would know that it's a lot of nothing there. We have it's undeveloped. It's raw land. There's no infrastructure within the areas that we're looking to develop. So the Metropolitan Airport Development Team, which was backed by a billionaire investor, Sam Bellsberg, and their estate, proposed to come in and basically build the city a $1.4 billion airport. We appraised the property based on raw land, them not having, they would eventually have to come in and put in all of the infrastructure, streets, highways, sewer, wet and dry utilities, the entire package, before they could even begin any development on the site. This took almost 10 years for them to finalize this agreement, which we finalized at the end of last year. They had earlier obtained their site development permit, obtained their environmental clearance, successfully defeated CEQA litigation. They negotiated a labor peace agreement with the San Diego County and Building and Construction Trades Council, and they've initiated the Federal Environmental Clearance, NEPA, which we are in the final stages of getting approval from the FAA. They're proposing to develop these 207 acres in 4 phases over 20 years. Now, they have indicated they intend to do the development within 7 years. But we put together an agreement that basically protects them against recession and things of that nature, whereas the first phase is 34 acres and includes the jet FBO. And they have to basically complete that within 30 months after the issuance of building permits. And the following are basically 5 years after initiation of construction on the first phase, and the second, third, and fourth phases follow suit. This is the Brownfield Airport. As you can see, heavily impacted by habitat such as the the San Diego Ferry shrimp, the burrowing owls. The entire 207 acres is impacted. So they were required to basically find mitigation land outside the airport, which they acquired over 30 plus acres. And we've also allowed them to transfer about 46 acres into the northwest quadrant. You can see it here. And use that where it basically is unusable land for the airport, but we've allowed them to use that as mitigation land as well. Here's a look of the development phases for this project. The red, the blue is actually the first phase, and it's beginning of the project, including the jet fixed base operator. And the red includes industrial, aviation, commercial. The green is commercial as well as hotels. We have 2 hotels planned for the site and things of that nature. This is analysis of the benefits that the airport received from the project. It included $1.4 billion benefits package over the terms of the agreement. The general fund also receives benefits from the project of almost $386 million over the term of the agreement, with $62 million going to the Otay Mesa Infrastructure Facilities Enhancement District. One of the things that we have at the airport is an existing tenant that will be displaced from the project because of this. That existing tenant was a non-aeronautical use. It was actually a junkyard. But they were paying us $250,000 a year. So we've reached an agreement with MAP whereby they would basically give us advance rent of $250,000 a year for up to 5 years when this tenant is displaced. They'll get to recapture that rent against future rent that they would pay the city in excess of the $250. There are a number of other issues, complicated issues, exchange of easements, a number of other arrangements that we had to make this deal possible, and I would be happy to share that information with you if you have any further questions. Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Thurman. Maybe a future topic would be how do you find these developers to pay for all of this? So I'd like to welcome Justin Bollum up to talk about his project out at Catalina. I'm not going to steal his thunder, but I'm really interested to see this one myself. I've seen the news articles, and I really look forward to hearing more information about it.
Thank you, Chris. We've got a really beautiful thing going on at Catalina. I am the airport manager there, as well as the senior systems administrator for the Catalina Island Conservancy, which is a private 501c3 nonprofit organization that owns about 88% of the island. So we have over 42,000 acres to take care of. The Conservancy was founded from the Wrigley family, who bought the island in its entirety back in the 1919, and they split off the nonprofit in '72 when P.K. Wrigley, the son of Bill Wrigley, was in his later stages of life. So they endowed the Conservancy with a large pot of money that we get as far as the interest to spend on improvements. We also get membership revenue and then operational income from doing things like operating an airport, which doesn't make a whole lot of money, but it requires some large capital improvements on every once in a while. We have over 60 endemics on the island. Those are plants and animals and invertebrates that are found nowhere else in the world. And we have also some of the largest stretches of undisturbed coastline in Southern California. And along with the airport to take care of, we've also got 160 miles of roads and trails that are open to the public. So for a nonprofit, there's a lot for us to do. We employ about 80 people, and on my staff, I have about 5. So we are a public airport, open to the public during our hours of operation. We are not governed by the FAA as a private airport. We do have to deal with the CalDOT public use permit. So that is why it's been a very hard road to get a runway built, because as a private airport, we're not in NIPIUS. So we have a single 3,000-foot long runway, and you can see a DC-3 landing on it there in the center picture. And we get about 7,000 landings a year on average, so not a whole lot going on there. But we do get all our USPS, FedEx mail, as well as life flights that come out to the island on occasion. And we are a key destination in the middle of the island. We're about 10 miles from the city of Avalon down a windy, bumpy road. And it's a great location for tourists to come, hikers as they're through hiking on our trails, to stop for a buffalo burger and just enjoy the spectacular views that we have up there. And we also do get Coast Guard life flights out there, as well as the LA County used our airport in 2007 for the major fire that burned about 25% of the island. We had about 50 firefighters living on the field with all their equipment that came out to help battle that blaze. So in order for us to get into NIPIUS, we would have to sign an agreement with a sponsor. We looked at the city of Avalon. We did a study with a consultant back in 2013 to identify what would be the best way for us to do that. And the study identified the county of LA with their large airport infrastructure already in place to be a great way for us to get into NIPIUS. We would have to lease out the airport or a portion of it. There was discussions on just doing the runway or the whole property on how to get into NIPIUS, and that was hard for the board to swallow. There were some easement issues because the airport's in the middle of the island. We want to protect those endemics that are there. We don't want to have a bunch of people trampling, one of the few 5 plants that are left in the world. And the 2 main sticking points were the grant assurances for, which is a good title, even though we own the land and have for many, many years. The Conservancy didn't want to be relegated to a role below the LA County. They wanted to be able to make decisions for the future of the island based on their vision of what it should be. And then preserving the rights and powers of that sponsor would be hard for the board to do. So that's why we didn't end up getting into NIPIUS, and we ended up getting into an agreement with the Marines. So currently we have Marines and Seabees living and working at the airport that came into the island on January 3rd. And they're already pouring concrete. And to get that to happen, we had to enter an agreement with them. We've been working on it for about 2 years now. A memorandum of understanding to get into the Innovative Readiness Training Program, which is what IRT stands for. So to do that, we had to meet essential military training needs that also resulted in incidental benefits to the community. The military, generally when they do training exercises, they build something and then blow it up. So for us to have a runway left over is a really great benefit for the island community. They had to go through a review of our nonprofit status, making sure that we are who we say we are and that we are able to also fund the project because the Conservancy is paying for the materials, the fuel. We're taking care of everything except for the labor of the Marines and their food. And then we also had to get the DoD to sign off on this. So this was signed by the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. They decided that this was a great private-public collaboration to get not just great publicity, but also great training. The Marines, as you know, have some new aircraft, and their F-35s and Ospreys have vectored thrust, and they can't land on asphalt. They would just cook it. So they had to learn how to build concrete. And so this is going to be a great exercise for them to know that they can get into a remote location, which Catalina Island is fairly remote, and the logistics of setting up a base and then building a concrete runway in a challenging environment. And that agreement was signed in August of 9th of 2018. And so we have been working fast and furious to get everything lined up and ready to go since it was actually signed and they said that we could go forward with the project. And 1MEF is the Marine Expeditionary Force based out of Pendleton, has tasked the Marine Support Wing 373 out of Miramar to come out and do the project, and I'll give a little breakdown of that here in a minute. The existing runway that we had was asphalt, and it was in rough shape. For anybody who has landed out there will tell you that it was a bumpy ride. The amount of repair work that myself and my staff had to do on a daily basis to keep the FOD down and to cold patch the potholes, which thankfully were not very deep because our asphalt was very thin. So we'd spend about $250,000 a year on maintaining this piece of pavement, and we had to come up with the $5 million in order to do that, and then the labor savings from the Marines is going to be valued somewhere around $1 million, and this is kind of the breakdown of how the two groups are working together. So not only are the Marines involved in this, the Navy Seabees are doing a lot of the surveying, engineering, and assistance with the training of the Marines who haven't really dealt with concrete before. So they're getting a lot of hands-on knowledge from people, reservists, that have been doing this a long time, both in the private sector as well as with the Seabees. And then the Conservancy is handling the project management side. I have a capital projects manager as well as a government liaison helping us get this project completed. We're planning on pouring about 2,700 yards of concrete. We've got approximately 18 miles of rebar to put in there. We're using epoxy-coated rebar for the marine environment. And we're doing all this within the existing runway footprint. So this is a repair project, not a new runway. Just a very in-depth repair project. So to get everything there, we have about 100 Marines that brought 500 tons of heavy equipment on barges to 2 harbors. We drove them all up the hill to the airport, and now we have a multi-agency with those 2 groups working together, as well as the Conservancy to help supply all the consumables, the fuel, the water that goes into the construction and compaction process on the runway surface. So my boss, the COO, Tim Kilpinski and Lenny, have been working hard, as well as Cynthia, to make sure we get everybody together on the same page and do this in a very short period of time. From 1MEF, we have Lieutenant Colonel Duncan Buchanan, who also has Lieutenant Saul Perez. Lieutenant Perez is a Navy Seabee that has been attached to 1MEF. And then on site we have Captain Nicole Stockham, and she is the leader in charge of the project for the entirety. And since December 10th, the main runway has been shut down, and we are using a temporary runway for our cargo flights, which are still coming in. So it's a bit of logistics to get all the concrete trucks rolled around and the Part 135 all cargo carrier in and out on a daily basis. So that's just a brief breakdown. We're hoping to be done with the pouring of the concrete in end of March, and then we'll be striping and hopefully reopening the airport in mid-April. Our board of directors was very supportive of this project. Kelly Johnson is our chair, and she also has an aerospace company that donated a nice 7-figure check to get the naming rights for the airfield. So we're going to call it the A.A.E. Clearwater Airfield at the Airport in the Sky, and that's thanks to her and her company that we're getting this project really going. So we will be open for business. The DC-3 Bar and Grill will be open if anybody wants to come out and check out the project. We will still be serving burgers. Catalina Flying Boats is our 135 operator I was just talking to. But we are restricting landings. The PPR requirements, prior permission required to come in, we wanted to keep it pretty strict as to limit any interruptions in the work. We are having a Distinguished Visitors Day on March 1st, so we're inviting a lot of media, brass from the military, as well as the local representatives at the state and federal levels to come out and view the project. So if anybody has interest of coming out, please see me afterwards, and we'll get you an invite. So there's a couple of pictures of what it looks like. We had some rain at the start of the project, set us back a little bit. When we're doing compaction, it's not good to roll heavy equipment around in the mud. And this is just after the rain left us. We had a nice little rainbow, so I took that shot. And you can see the Marine encampment is actually on the A.A.E site. So we have Marines guarding us to make sure that we keep everybody away from the airplanes, and also do traffic control. And here they are pouring concrete. So we've got a power screed going, concrete trucks there. And this is looking southwest from the 22 side of the runway. And then looking back towards the mainland on another day, you see we've got a few pads poured there. And then you can also see the temporary runway off to the right-hand side of the picture there. So this is it's been a great public-private partnership. The Marines are really amazing, especially at their officer level. The depth of knowledge and professionalism has just been over the top, as well as the boots on the ground have been working really hard, 6-7 days a week to get this going. And I also wanted to, I know we have some veterans here, especially on the panel today. I am not one of them, but if there are any other veterans in the room, I'd like to ask you to stand up so we can show our appreciation for those that have served the country.
Thank you, Justin. Between Thurman and Justin's projects, it really is showing thinking outside of the box. We will have some time for questions about those two presentations, and then also about some generic lease terms and negotiating if we have some time. But before that, I'd like to ask Michael. He wants to talk about developing relationships with current tenants and stakeholders, because oftentimes those are the people that you will be negotiating your leases with as their leases are expiring.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to stay here. They say you learn something new every day. Well, I just learned something new from Justin that, and I'm going to put this in my next AIP grant loan. Quote, "It's not a new runway, it's just a very in-depth repair project." Remember that one, a very in-depth repair project. And I just wanted to thank you for your service, Thurman. I know the Marines, we really appreciate our Navy brethren driving us in the gray boats to our next battle. I tried to think about the easiest and best lease negotiations I've ever experienced over the last 28 years, whether it be airlines, fire, sheriff, FBOs, hangar tenants, government business parks. And there were some commonalities that I came up with. Of course, the legal commonalities that we all know, the term of the lease, the investment, the rent dollar amount, the insurance, the indemnity, the leasehold area, rights of refusal, the airport fit. But the best ever lease negotiations I ever had were the easiest ones, and I'm sure most of you would agree, it's just like sitting across the table with a friend, with a business friend. So how do we form relationships with our tenants? And again, I'm telling you things that most of you already know. You visit your tenants often. You know, stop in, say hi, good ones, bad ones, all your tenants. The question I like to ask, and I always find the fascinating answer is, how did you get started in this business? And you'll get answers from my dad was a pilot to I started building. I know one of the biggest Kelly knows is one of the biggest FBOs at Mather Airport. Started out in Livermore building motorbikes. He just got interested in small engines, and he just took it from there. And now he's got one of the largest FBOs in California. So just ask questions, talk to them. Try to understand the business from their perspective, you're the landlord, you're there, you want the rent, you want your airport to run smoothly, but try to understand it from their perspective. What is their competition? Who's their competition? Are they in flux, or are they in an uptick, or is it a bad time for them? Are they hiring people? Are they not hiring? And to that end, also get ahead of the issues. Know your accounts receivable person very well. And take a look at the accounts receivable. That will tell you, the 30, 60 day people, maybe you don't have to worry about them too much. When you get to the 90, the 120s, you got a problem. There's a problem there. Go talk to the tenant. Find out, why are they 3, 4, 6 months behind? Get ahead of it, because, if you don't start collecting that rent, there's probably a bigger problem out there that you don't know about and you need to know about. Talk about the future with your good tenants, particularly your good tenants. Big or small, how can they grow? How do they want to grow? What can you do to help them grow? What other amenities can they bring to your airport? Obviously, they're good business people. They know how to work a business. What else can they do for you? Two more. Organize a stakeholder committee. And everyone, at my airport, we include everyone from TSA to fire department to the rent-a-cars. We make sure we have a stakeholder committee meeting so that we understand how our businesses and our relationships are interrelated. And don't be the chair of that. Don't be the chair of that. Don't try and run the meeting. Just sit back and attend. Make sure that somebody else is the chair of that stakeholder committee, and have it rotating so that you don't just have one loud voice all the time. And then the final aspect that really hit home for me was use eviction only as a last resort. As I mentioned, get ahead of your 30, 60, 90, 120 people. If you have to go to an eviction, maybe the business didn't fail, but you failed. If you had to get to that point where you felt the need and there was the legal reason to have to evict them. It really leaves a bad reputation on you and on your airport. So try and get ahead of it and form good relationships.
Thank you, Michael. Open lines of communication are obviously the key in successful lease negotiations. So if you have those relationships built before you go into those negotiations, it really does help. So we have time for some questions. They could be questions about either the two presentations that we've seen or just lease negotiations in general. And I also have a list of questions that can spur the communication going forward. But is there any questions to start with just on the what you've heard so far? There's a microphone will be coming around in just a minute. So we'll start over here on this side of the room, then we'll get to you in just a minute, Bill.
Thank you. I have two questions. One for Justin. In your minor repair project of your runway, are you going to remove that hump that's in the middle?
No, our famous hump is going to remain. It is about an extra $30 million to do that earthwork. There's a lot of bedrock there. The airport was originally created by leveling two mountaintops and then filling in the middle. The distance from the high point to the low point was about 150 feet in some areas. So to do that extra work was just not out of the scope of this project.
Thank you. My next question was for the gentleman from Fresno. How are your negotiations with the A&G going?
With whom?
Air National Guard?
With CANG, with California Air National Guard. So what specifically did you want to know about it?
Have you been able to reach an agreement?
With our AJUA? You mean with our...
Yeah, with the AJUA.
We did, and they almost signed it, and then the person who was going to sign it was put on government shutdown. So, so it's almost signed.
So, Mark, then I think Bill had a question up here as well.
You got answered about the hump.
Okay, we got you covered. Go ahead, Mark.
Regarding the development in San Diego, many times a developer is asked to do some public improvements like sidewalk and connections to sewer and storm drain. Was that viewed as a public improvement or just the necessary connection between a private development and public thoroughfares, both pedestrian and roadway?
It's on. Just start talking. They'll turn it up.
The development at Brownfield is definitely a public works project. Substantial infrastructure, wet and dry utilities, streets and roads. Yeah, that was definitely a public works contract. There was no avoiding that. I do actually have a question for the gentleman from Catalina.
I think we all do, Thurman, so go ahead.
Okay, all right. How long did you say it was going to take the Seabees to teach the Marines to pour concrete?
They're still working on it.
So my follow-up question to that is no disrespect to the Marines, but how are you overseeing the quality control of the concrete that's going in there as they're learning how to do this?
So we have Smith Emery has donated their time and expertise on that, as well as we have a capital projects manager, Lenny, who is a general contractor. So he's overseeing some of the quality control as well as the testing by Smith Emery will make sure that we have a decent product at the end of it.
Question in the back.
I have a question for Michael. Just from the other side, I'm over here. Hi. Just from the other side of things, if a tenant is trying to either better or build a relationship with the airport or leaseholder, how would you recommend going about that?
If the tenant is trying to build a relationship with the airport, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, from your standpoint, or from, I guess, your position with the airport, what are like things you look for that would make you respect or appreciate a tenant more?
I think the onus is really on the airport management to reach out to the tenant. I don't know that it's the tenant's responsibility to reach back. I mean, some of them are going to be reticent, but there's just ways to break down those barriers. Like I said, just visit them often. As I was talking to Gabe from Modesto, just do the wave, the drive-by wave every day.
I think another way to ask that is, are there things that tenants can be doing to look better to the airport in the airport's mind?
Yeah, cut your lawn, paint your building, do all your tenant responsibilities. As I learned as a tax auditor early in life, is RTF, read the form. Actually, it's RTFF, but read the form, read the lease, understand maintenance responsibilities. Who's responsible for what? And again, when you go to negotiate, those shouldn't even be an issue. Both sides should already understand what each side needs to do.
Okay.
So I guess that's my
Thank
point
you.
is.
Cooper?
Hi, Thurman. I just wanted to go over something you kind of skipped over in your presentation, which was at the first project, the pre-existing one. How did the negotiation with the quitclaim from the existing tenant go, and how did that negotiation happen?
Thanks for that question, Coop. I obviously didn't have enough time to elaborate, but let me talk about that some. The tenant that we had there had been there for over 40 years. It was before him, his father actually ran the business, and he had become occupied with other business that he had. He had no intention of renewing his agreement, but he was agreeable to cooperating with us. So, in essence, we put together, and in fact, because he was in holdover and had been in holdover for a number of years, we had to put together an interim lease so that we could get him to agree to quitclaim those improvements to a future tenant selected by the city. He was agreeable, and that was really all it took.
Any other questions? So I've got one I'll throw out there. There's a lot of airports out here that are much smaller. They don't have real estate properties divisions, things like that. What are some of the resources that they may be able to turn to try to get help in negotiating leases? And I've got some examples I can provide as well, but anybody on the panel?
Yeah, for myself, I'm a certified property manager, so I belong to an organization called IREM, and there are numerous, throw a quarter and you're gonna hit 5 real estate agents in town. So just there's real estate people all over. If you work for a municipality, be it a city or a county, there should be plenty of real estate people. You've got your attorneys and your county council.
That is the case at Orange County. Before we actually had a separate division that actually worked at the airport, most of the agreements and negotiations took place through a centralized real estate department, a general services agency.
By a show of hands, how many in the room actually are involved in negotiating leases? So there's another resource for you right there. Some of those people are available. I don't know if you've heard of, there's a group called RAPM, the Western Region Airport Property Managers Association. It's really not an official association, but they do have an email chain that goes around with a lot of questions every day. In fact, my email box gets full when I'm at a conference like this. But if anybody would like to be connected with them, I can put you in touch with them as well. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions if you have one.
I got one, Chris. Corey Hazelwood, CNS. Thurman, first off, having worked with you through the P3 development process at San Diego, you did a great job in processing a distressed asset on an airport that is a great metropolitan airport for the city of San Diego. But one of the questions I have is, how did you keep your city team on target dates and hitting those dates? Because as much of us know in the airport business, sometimes things go slow, and you held the line very, very well through that process. So what was the key to success there?
We believe that the strategy is to develop a schedule early on with milestones, and you push toward those milestones. When you're not able to meet as it appears that you're not going to be able to meet a milestone, you just simply have to add additional resources to that until you're able to do that. So that's what our strategy has been. We get our executive management team involved early. We let them know about issues as they arise. And in many cases, we've already developed responses for some of those issues. So that's what we're going to be looking at going forward with our project management approach to these projects.
Tell them what your nickname is, Thurman. Tell them what your nickname is.
I don't know about this, but okay. My name is Thurman, and so Ivor, who I was moving toward the milestone that we had, referred to me as the Thurminator. So.
And so I don't want to put Scotty on the spot here, but I don't know if you can give any information. I know the Association of California Airports had a listserv that was available for quite a while with a lot of information that was shared. Is that still something that's out there?
No and yes. So we changed carriers, if you will, and have dropped that whole system down. So Mary is actually working with our new carrier to bring it back up. So when it does come back up, it'll be an available resource. And you don't have to be a member of SWAHI, beg your pardon, ACA to participate in that. Yeah. You can simply log in, put your credentials in, ask any question you like.
I can say it was a very valuable resource just being signed up for it. I didn't have to ask those questions because everybody else was asking them and providing the answers. Go ahead, Thurman.
One more comment for you before you leave. If you are interested in understanding the vision that the developer for the Metropolitan Air Park has for his project, just Google up Scottsdale Air Park, and you can see what this particular developer has envisioned for that Metropolitan Air Park development. And also, we're going to be actually reaching out to many of you as we develop basically our plans, budget, and scope for several projects that we have upcoming at Montgomery Gibbs Executive Airport. We've got some non-aeronautical development projects we'd like to move forward, as well as some aeronautical projects. We've got an existing lessee that's in holdover 24 acres, and we've got to figure out what to do with that. So we'll be reaching out to some of you. Thank you.
And I'm thankful that the panel came together as well as it did. It was actually kind of fluid in the last couple of weeks. We had somebody that dropped out, and they were going to be giving a better presentation on this airport, Metropolitan Airport project, but Thurman actually stepped up to help cover that, so thank you, Thurman. Maybe time for one more question. Well, with that, I'd like to thank our panel and give them a warm welcome applause.
All right, that concludes the 59th Annual Monterey Short Course. We will be sending an updated attendee directory via email after the conference. Please join us for the cocktail reception at 6 p.m., sponsored by Kaufman Associates. It's going to be right outside the Dolphin Ballroom, and that will start at 7 p.m., and thanks for a great conference. Oh, last thing, the corporate membership meeting says it is in the Monterey Bay Room. It is not. It is, in fact, in here. So if you are attending that, do not move.
And if you're a student, you're expected back here at the tech table.